to come to this conference and to speak a little bit here. I think it's very clear that mankind has come a long way. In the 50s and the 60s, economic development and GDP was the goal which was driving all of us. Then I think UNDP brought in Human Development Index, which brought in really in some sense the idea of inequality and human development, some aspects of empowerment in it. And now we have gone to Sustainable Development Goals, which broadens our whole concept of what development is about, what we want to do, and so on. To that extent, I completely agree with Jim Taylor that 2015 is an essential watershed in this. But I have a slight reservation that I think 2015 watershed may be just a little bit of change of direction, but we need perhaps much stronger changes in direction, so that what Paris Agreement said is a good beginning, but we need much more stronger action on climate change issue at least. And I think in all these, the sustainable development yardstick, or you could say, should be the major objective of all our development activities at all. And here, I think education plays an extremely important role, because as was Simon said, it breeds values in it, and that people really follow essentially that. And we have seen that the kind of values one breeds in does affect one's life and action. But I would also point out that whatever you teach, whatever you suggest people, and say that this is the way to behave for sustainable development, unless you give them options, unless you give them alternatives to change their behavior, they would not be able to do that. So that it is absolutely critical at the same time that you say, okay, I'll give you renewable energy, but renewable energy must provide the same kind of service and facilities as other kinds of energy does, and it should do it at a reasonable cost, and it should provide the same ability to people to work. So it is very important that we think in terms of a development strategy which permits sustainable development as an essential, viable, and an attractive option for people to choose from. So it's not only important to make people want to do something, but also it is important to make them, enable them to be able to do that. And that, I think, is a critical element. I mean, if you look at India with its vast number of civil society NGOs, many of them working in rural areas and so on, and their total impact in some sense is there on the ground, and you can see it, and yet many of them have not been scaled up to the level and extent that one would like them to be. And I think here the problem comes is people often push an idea and without understanding the need and the requirement of the target groups. So that in some sense it is not only important to educate the citizens and the people, but it is also equally important to educate some of the, I think, the civil society activists as to see really which is the direction in which they should go. So in a very broader perspective, yes, education for values is important, but at the same time, you recognize that that is not going to be the end of it. In some sense, you could say that almost all religions have been preaching a frugal lifestyle which says consumption is not everything. You are not going to be happy with just unbounded consumption. And yet we have seen most people in most religions and most countries who have the money, who have the resources, are running for that kind of a lifestyle. And if I was telling some people that if I see India is supposed to be a very spiritual country and so on, but if I see some of the Indians settled in America and how they behave, I would say Indians make the best Americans. They have a same profligate, wasteful lifestyle as any American would have. So that it is we need to go really think, ask ourselves what kind of an education that should really be instilled that make people behave in a more sustained and a consistent way. Thank you all.